On my 68th birthday, I received a mysterious gift. No card, no sender's name, just a few cold lines of text. Happy birthday. But I immediately recognized the handwriting I could never forget from the son I had raised for 20 years, Ethan. It had been 3 years since I had last seen him. I opened the package. Inside was a box of rare herbal tea, so beautiful it could be placed on a shelf as a display piece. But I knew full well, ever since my heart attack, Ethan knew I had to avoid all strong-flavored teas. Instead of drinking it, I gave it to Robert Carson, my in-law. Just a box of tea. Or so I thought until it nearly took Robert's life, and my own. I left the tea box on the kitchen table, unopened. The October afternoon light pierced through the blinds, casting sharp, knife-like streaks of light onto its dark green lid. Tea. A seemingly ordinary gift. But in that light, it seemed like something else. A foreign object with a life of its own, just lying there, waiting for me to be careless. Ethan knew I no longer drank this. 3 years ago, when my heart first started to flutter, he was sitting right there, listening to the doctor read a list of things I had to avoid. Coffee, alcohol, and even herbal tea. I remember his eyes at the time cold, without a flicker of reaction, as if the doctor were talking about someone else. So why now, after 3 years of silence, would he send me the very thing he knew I couldn't touch? A wish for health? A mockery? Or a message I wasn't brave enough to read? I didn't intend to keep it in the house. The sight of the tea box lying there made the air heavier with each passing hour. The room was already laden with memories, and now something that didn't belong was crammed in. I thought of Robert Carson. That man never came empty-handed. When my porch was broken, he brought a ladder. During my first winter living alone, he stacked firewood on the front porch. A person like that deserved a gift more than I did, no matter whose hands it came from. That afternoon, I placed the tea box into a wicker basket, covering it with a cloth as if to shield it from its gaze. I drove to Robert's house. The suburban road was thick with the acrid smell of burning fields, a scent that clung to my wool sweater. The sky darkened, turning a coppery red like glowing iron. Robert was waiting on the porch, his red flannel shirt worn at the shoulders, his gaunt but strong hands still smelling of pine resin. When he saw me get out of the car with the basket, he smiled. "What have you brought this time, Margaret?" I handed him the tea box. "A gift. From Ethan for me. I think you'll appreciate it more." He turned the tea box in his hands, the last of the daylight casting a thin halo around it. "This is a rare one. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." My voice sounded dry, more resolute than I truly felt. He smiled. "Then I'll brew some tonight. I'm sure Linda will like it too." I nodded and drove away as dusk settled. In the rearview mirror, my face looked dark and rigid, like the sharp lines on the tea box. I had given it away, and I thought that was the end of it. The phone rang just as I lay down in bed. The ring echoed through the empty house, sudden and cold, like a knock at the door in the dead of night. I looked at the screen. A strange number, but I knew. The way the numbers appeared, unbidden, still made my heart skip a beat. I picked up. The voice on the other end was hoarse and low, as if coming from a dark room. "Mom, have you tried the tea yet?" No introduction, no name, just one question, and I knew it was Ethan. I was silent for a moment. Then I replied, "Number." I gave it to Robert Carson. A void on the other end. I heard a heavy, prolonged breath, like wind seeping through a crack in the door. Then the silence stretched out, thick and dense, until it felt as though the whole house would collapse under its weight. Finally, Ethan spoke. "So you gave it to Robert. Already." 3 words, no more. Then just a cold click. The call ended. I sat motionless, my hand still clutching the phone like a block of ice. In the darkness, the tea box was no longer in my house, but I could still feel its presence, weaving into every grain of wood, every beat of my heart. The silence Ethan left behind wasn't the silence of someone surprised. It was the silence of someone calculating. I lay down, but I couldn't sleep. The faint light from the nightstand lamp cast a pale yellow over the wall. I heard my heart beat, slow and heavy, as if my body had already understood what my mind was not yet ready to accept. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know that the very next morning, the truth would come flooding in with another phone call, and this time, it wouldn't be from Ethan. The phone rang again before it was fully light. I looked at the clock. The hands pointed to 6:07. This time, it was Linda's number. My hand trembled before I could even pick it up. Margaret. Her voice was ragged, choked as if she had just run through a storm. Robert. He fainted last night. The ambulance took him at midnight. The doctor said. There were signs of poisoning. I froze. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly the rough plastic dug into my skin. Linda continued, her voice trembling. He only had 1 cup of tea. The tea you brought over yesterday. Right after that, he started vomiting. And then collapsed. I thought I was going to lose him. I tried to keep my voice steady. How is he now? They pumped his stomach. He's stable for now. But the doctor said if it had been an hour later, maybe. Linda's voice broke. I sank onto a chair. The kitchen was pitch black, with only the faint light of dawn filtering through the window, shining directly onto the empty space on the table where the tea box had been. The box was gone, but its trace still clung. I couldn't shake the image of Robert, the man who had always been there for me, now lying in a hospital bed because of the very gift I had given him. The question from last night echoed in my mind. Mom, have you tried the tea yet? It wasn't a question of concern, nor was it an accident. Ethan knew. He wanted me to drink it. I walked to the cabinet and opened the drawer. On the high shelf, there was still a small packet I had intended to keep to try sometime. The tea leaves were dark, their pungent smell wafting out like something alive. I didn't need to smell it again to understand. Something was hidden in here. What Robert had ingested, what Ethan wanted me to ingest. My hands trembled, but my mind grew cold. I knew what I had to do. I held the remaining packet of tea in my hand, like a piece of evidence. It wasn't heavy, just a few dozen grams of dried leaves, but the entire weight of the house felt concentrated in my palm. I didn't sleep all night. I sat in the darkness, listening to the clock tick, to the house breathing in and out, and thought of Robert. The image of him lying motionless in the hospital bed kept repeating, intertwined with the memory of his gentle smile when he received the tea box from my hands. I had brought death to a person who didn't deserve it. The next morning, I called Gary. Gary used to be a neighbor. Now he worked at the county veterinary lab. We hadn't kept in touch much, but I knew he still had the same good heart, that practical, no-fuss kindness. When he heard me say I had an herb I needed him to test, Gary's voice hesitated for a moment, but then he agreed. I could hear the click of his ballpoint pen on the other end, as if he were taking notes. The sky was gloomy, the clouds so heavy they seemed to hang just above my head as I drove there. The lab was located on the outskirts of town, a square, gray building with white neon lights filtering through its glass doors. The air inside always carried a mix of smells, chemicals, disinfectant, and that distinct scent of cold metal. Gary met me at the door, hands in the pockets of his lab coat, his face gaunt, his eyes tired but bright. I gave him the packet of tea, my voice low as if afraid of being overheard. Can you test the contents of this tea box? I need to know exactly what it contains. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. He didn't ask why, didn't show any suspicion. He just took it. His movements were careful, as if he were holding a weapon. I knew Gary had figured out at least some of it. I sat in the waiting room, the smell of disinfectant making my head spin. The wall clock ticked 1 second at a time, each second stretched into a minute. Through the glass pane, I saw Gary's silhouette moving among the equipment, his white lab coat blending with the cold blue light. The machines hummed, then fell silent, then started up again. An hour later, he returned. His face was pale. He was holding a printed paper, but he didn't hand it to me immediately. Margaret, he said my name slowly, as if choosing each word. The tea contains white snakeroot extract. Do you know this plant? I nodded, my throat constricting. White snakeroot, a wild plant that grew in the woods, famous since the 19th century for causing fatal milk sickness after cows ate it. A silent death, a fluttering heart, trembling muscles, and finally, collapse. It had no scent or taste strong enough to be immediately recognized. Gary continued, "The dosage in the tea sample is enough to kill a person with a history of heart disease. You need to call the police, Margaret. This isn't accidental. Someone did this with intent." I looked at the printed paper, at the cold numbers, and felt as if I were looking at a prepared indictment. I had no other choice but to face the truth. Ethan didn't just send a gift. He sent a trap. And if Robert hadn't drunk it, the one who was supposed to drink it was me. I folded the analysis paper, put it in my pocket, along with the sealed tea packet in a plastic bag. The bag was small, but when I placed it in my car's basket, I heard the rustle of the plastic like a verdict being read. The entire way to the police station, I had only one thought. Ethan wanted me dead. There was no other way to explain it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clumsy wish for health. This was a decision, a deliberate act, a conspiracy. The police station was in the center of town, an old red brick building with a gray tiled roof, the American flag on the pole out front still fluttering in the early wind. Inside, the smell of weak coffee mixed with the scent of paper, photocopiers, and the dryness of metal. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking, causing people to glance up briefly before returning to their work. The person I needed to see was Detective Reyes. I knew him from a small robbery a few years ago, back when he was new to this town. A tall man of Latin American descent, with a sharp, angular face and eyes that were always both keen and calm, as if he had learned how not to let anything faze him. When Reyes saw me, he nodded and invited me into his office. He closed the door, narrowing the space to a small room filled with stacks of files and a few coffee mugs with dried rings at the bottom. "I have something serious," I said, my voice so low and dry it sounded strange even to me. I placed the plastic bag on the table. Inside, the tea packet lay still like a trapped animal. "I want you to test it again. A lab has already confirmed it contains white snake root. Robert Carson had to be hospitalized after drinking it. This gift was sent by Ethan, my son." Reyes looked at me for a long moment, then opened the bag, lifting the tea packet with a gloved hand. He brought it close to his nose, not to smell, but just to look, as if reading an invisible inscription on it. After a few seconds, he set it down, his eyes darkening. "White snake root," he repeated. "I've read about it. History is not short of deaths from this plant. But it's impossible for it to be in commercial tea. This was intentional." I nodded. Ethan knew I had a heart condition. He knew tea was something I couldn't drink, but he sent it to me. Not only that night he called and asked me directly if I had tried it. When I said I had given it to Robert, he went silent. Then he hung up. Reyes leaned back in his chair, lacing his hands together in front of him. "If what you're saying is true, this is no longer a family matter. This is a crime. Do you have any of the unused portion?" I brought it all. He nodded and called for an officer to take the tea packet down to the forensics lab. Then he looked at me, slowly. "You need to prepare yourself. If this is truly an attempted murder, then Ethan will face more than a light sentence. The question is, why? Why would a son want to harm his own mother?" I didn't answer right away. In my mind, I saw an image of 10-year-old Ethan, standing in the backyard with a basketball in his hand, smiling so brightly his eyes were squeezed shut. Then, the image of 15-year-old Ethan, slamming his bedroom door, his eyes colder than steel. And then, 30-year-old Ethan, in the hospital room, looking at me as the doctor read the list of forbidden medications, his eyes devoid of a single ounce of compassion. I think," I whispered, "the reason won't be simple, but I'm ready to hear it, whatever it is." Reyes was silent for a few seconds, then picked up his pen and began to write. "We'll need Robert's medical records and Linda's testimony. I'll get in touch. And you, Margaret, you should be careful. If Ethan tried once, he'll try again." I looked at him, my eyes reflecting the pale neon light from the ceiling. "I know. And this time, I won't be taken by surprise." The town hospital was located in the north, a block of buildings weathered to a silvery white. I arrived while it was still drizzling, the corridors reeking of disinfectant, the flickering fluorescent lights making everything feel cold and detached. Robert was in the emergency room, his arms full of wires, the heart monitor beeping in a steady rhythm. That heart had once beaten so strongly when he carried a bundle of wood on his shoulder, and now it had to rely on a machine to keep it from slowing down too much. Linda was sitting on a hard plastic chair, her eyes dark with exhaustion, her hair disheveled as if she had just weathered a storm. When I walked in, she sprang to her feet, her voice breaking. "Margaret! Oh my God! I thought I'd lost him. If I hadn't called the ambulance in time." I placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the trembling pass through her thin sweater. We sat down. I asked, "Linda, tell me everything. What exactly happened?" She took a deep breath, her hands clutched tightly together. He brewed the tea right after dinner. I still remember the sound of boiling water being poured into the cup, the pungent smell spreading through the kitchen. I thought it was strange, and when I asked, he just smiled and said you'd given him a rare tea, so he wanted to try it right away. Just a few minutes later, he turned pale, clutched his stomach, and then started vomiting violently. I panicked and called an ambulance. By the time they arrived, he was almost unconscious. Her voice choked, and tears fell onto her sleeve. I looked down at the floor, the image replaying in my mind like a film reel, the tea box on my kitchen table, the afternoon light shining on it, and I myself had brought it to Robert's hands, giving it to him with a forced smile. Linda looked up, her eyes red and swollen. They said there was a toxic substance in his blood, a substance they couldn't immediately identify. They suspect it's from that tea. "Margaret, you didn't know. You couldn't have known, could you?" I squeezed her hand. "I didn't know, but I will find out." Outside the window, it grew darker, and the rain fell harder, each drop hitting the hospital awning like a cold rhythmic knock. I looked at Robert, his chest rising and falling slightly with the help of the machine. The man who had once been a solid support for the whole family, now knocked down by a single cup of tea. I recalled Ethan's voice on the phone. "Mom, have you tried the tea yet?" Now I understood. He didn't need to ask how it tasted. He was asking to make sure I had drunk it. I stood up and walked out into the corridor. Detective Reyes was waiting, a notebook in his hand. I said only one sentence, my voice low and firm. "You were right. This wasn't an accident. Ethan tried to kill me, and Robert was just the one who drank it instead." Reyes nodded slowly, his eyes darkening. "Well then, from here on, we'll see how far Ethan will go to bury his intentions." I looked through the glass pane, seeing Robert lying motionless. A determination rose inside me, cold as steel. Ethan had started this war, and I would end it. Reyes received the tea packet from the forensics lab and returned to me a day later. He didn't beat around the bush. We've confirmed it. The tea was mixed with white snake root. It's not a commercial product, but a handmade concoction. Someone did this on purpose. He placed another file on the desk. I had my people trace the order. This tea box was bought from an herbal shop on the outskirts of town. Paid for with cash. But the store has a camera. He flipped to a few printed photos from the security camera. The figure of a man, wearing a baseball cap, head bowed. But the angle was enough for me to recognize him immediately, the jawline, the familiar shoulders. I didn't need to wait for Reyes to speak. "Ethan." He nodded. He was careful, but not enough. The time of purchase matches the day the package was sent. We also have the shipping receipt, with a fake signature. I looked at the paper, the scrawled handwriting both familiar and chilling. The hand that once wrote innocent birthday wishes years ago was now writing a death sentence for me. Reyes closed the file, his voice cold. "Margaret, this is no longer a suspicion. This is evidence. The problem now is the motive. We'll find out. But you need to prepare yourself, because every turn leads back to your family." I sat in silence. In my chest, my heart beat slowly, heavy as a sledgehammer. I had raised him for 20 years, and now I had to face him as a killer. A few days later, Reyes called me to the station. He didn't waste any time. "We've gone through the financial records," he said, placing a thin file on the table. "Ethan is in debt. A significant amount. Credit card loans, failed investments. It all points to one thing. He needed money urgently." I was silent, looking down at the numbers. It wasn't the first time Ethan had fallen into debt, but this time was different. This time, he had gone so far as to want to eliminate his own mother. Reyes flipped to another page. According to the law, if you pass away, the inheritance would go to Ethan, including this house, and the savings left by Daniel. Over $40 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel. The man with whom I had built everything, leaving a legacy for his son. And now, that legacy had become the reason he wanted me gone. Reyes spoke slowly. The motive is clear. With you alive, he has nothing. With you dead, he has everything. Too simple. Too clean. I clenched my hands on the table. In my mind, an image of Ethan as a child returned, his eyes once bright when his father lifted him up. Now those eyes were cold. Cold enough to calculate my life. Reyes leaned forward, his voice dropping. Margaret, there's no going back from here. We'll start gathering search warrants, and when we have enough, Ethan will face court. But I need you to be vigilant. Because in cases like this, the perpetrator usually doesn't stop after one failure. I nodded. I understood. Ethan had tried once. He would try again. And next time, it might not just be aimed at me. I met Ethan again on the porch, one October evening, the wind whistling through the bare trees. I had just stepped out of the supermarket when I saw him standing there, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, his demeanor so calm it was alien. It's been a while, he said, his voice low. No apology, no explanation. I looked straight into his eyes. They were the same eyes, but there was no warmth left. Only a calculating emptiness. Ethan, you know exactly what you sent me. The corner of his mouth twitched. It's just a box of tea. What's the big deal? I felt my heart slow down, but my voice was strangely calm. Robert almost died. If he had, what were you going to say? He shrugged, his eyes scanning, then stopping to look directly at me. I didn't force him to drink it. You gave it to him. The words were colder than any knife. I clenched my hands so tightly my nails dug into my skin. In that instant, I saw it clearly. Ethan wasn't just calculating. He was also ready to pin all the blame on me if he had to. I took a step forward, keeping my voice low. You thought I'd be silent, didn't you? But I took that tea box to the police. They know, and they'll find you. For a moment, the smile on his face vanished. Silence fell like a thick layer of ice. Then Ethan whispered, almost snarling, You shouldn't have done that. I stood still, letting the distance between us grow heavier with each beat. We were no longer mother and son, just two adversaries, knowing a war had begun. 2 days after our confrontation, Reyes called me to the station. The file was almost complete. He said the search warrant would be signed that week, and Ethan would be arrested for questioning. I nodded, feeling a small sense of relief in my chest for the first time. But that relief didn't last. That afternoon, Reyes called again, his voice different, heavy and sharp. Margaret, something's happened. Ethan just filed a complaint. He claims you deliberately poisoned Robert Carson to frame him. He brought a copy of your heart medical records, saying you had a motive to get rid of Robert to seize Linda's assets. I was stunned. What? Reyes sighed. He's one step ahead. He knows we're closing in. So he's building a counter-narrative. You have a medical history. You hate Linda. You handed the tea box to Robert. He just needs to sow enough doubt to make the court hesitate. This is a two-sided game. I gripped the phone tightly, my mind reeling. On one hand, I had evidence. The camera, the receipt, the lab analysis. But on the other, Ethan had the surface truth. I was the one who handed the tea box to Robert. In the rearview mirror of the parked car, I saw my face. Aged by decades, my eyes bloodshot but no longer trembling. Ethan thought he could reverse the game, turning me from a victim into a killer. I said softly, my voice like steel. Detective Reyes. He's just declared a real war, so we won't stop at evidence. We'll go straight for the ultimate truth. Reyes was quiet for a moment, then replied, If you're tough enough, Margaret, this will be the decisive step. We won't just arrest him. We'll unmask him, in front of the entire family. The Carsons' living room had never been so quiet. Linda sat next to Robert, still pale after his days in the hospital. I faced them, And across from me was Ethan, his composure so fake it was unsettling. Detective Reyes stood in the middle, like a pivot holding the entire room from collapsing. "We're going to talk frankly," Reyes began. His voice was low and firm, not allowing anyone to interrupt. A box of tea, a man who almost died, and two conflicting stories. Ethan smirked, looking around before his gaze settled on me. "You gave the tea box to Robert. You knew he would drink it. And now, you want to blame me?" Linda was stunned, turning to me. "Margaret, is that true?" I didn't look at her. I only looked straight at my son. "You bought that tea box. The store's security camera recorded it. The shipping receipt also has your signature." Reyes placed the file on the table, flipping through the photos. Ethan's silhouette, blurry but recognizable enough, the receipt with the familiar handwriting, the lab analysis confirming the poison. The room fell silent. Robert forced himself to sit up, his voice hoarse. "Ethan, did you do this?" For a moment, Ethan's gaze wavered. But then he laughed, his voice hard and cold. "The image is blurry. The signature could be forged. Who can prove it? The clear truth is, she's the one who put the tea box in law's hand. If Dad hadn't drunk it, then who was supposed to?" All eyes turned to me. I could hear my heart clearly, each beat like a hammer striking. But I didn't tremble. I stood up, my voice articulate and clear. "Yes, I gave it to Robert. But you know what, Ethan? I never opened it. Because I've known for a long time that my son would never send a gift just to say happy birthday. You called that same night, asking me if I had tried it. That's the biggest piece of evidence. Not the tea box, it's your very words." The room fell silent. Linda's hand trembled as she covered her mouth. Robert looked at Ethan, his eyes filled with pain. Reyes took notes, then looked up, his voice firm as a nail. "You have the right to remain silent, Ethan. But silence won't save you." Ethan squinted, giving a weak laugh, but his hand trembled slightly on his knee. I saw it clearly for the first time. His facade was cracking. Ethan sneered, leaning back in the chair. "You've always been good at making things up. A phone call suddenly becomes evidence? Why didn't you bring a recording then? Or is it just the shaky memory of an old woman?" Linda let out a small gasp, looking at me, her eyes wavering. Robert frowned, but said nothing. The air was like a taut wire about to snap. I held my gaze on my son's face, every familiar line now twisted by deceit. "You thought I wouldn't be prepared? That call was recorded. The service provider has confirmed the time, the phone number, and the content. Reyes has a copy." Reyes placed another thin file on the table. "The call took place at 9:12 p.m. It's your voice, Ethan. You clearly asked your mother if she had drunk the tea yet. We'll present it in court." Ethan's face paled for a moment, but he fought back immediately. "A harmless question. It proves nothing. If it was poisoned, why did you keep it for days without reporting it right away?" I replied, my voice cold as steel. "Because I wanted to be sure. And now I am." He jumped to his feet, his voice snarling. "No. This is a trap. You want to cut me out of everything Dad left. From the beginning, you never considered me your own flesh and blood." The words rang out, sharp as a knife. Linda flinched, looking at me. Robert sank down, his eyes filled with disappointment. Reyes raised his hand, stopping the chaos. "That's enough, Ethan. We have enough to proceed. You have the right to remain silent. And from now on, everything you say will be recorded." Ethan looked around, his gaze piercing me one last time. For a moment, I saw my son, no longer the child I had raised, but a stranger, desperately clinging to the darkness. He whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You're going to pay for this." I looked back at him, without blinking. "No, Ethan. You are the one who has to pay." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed dryly in the living room. Two police officers moved in, holding Ethan's arms tightly. He struggled, yelling, "You're making a mistake. I'm the victim here. She's the one who wanted to kill Robert." No one answered. Only Linda bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. Robert turned away, his eyes squeezed shut as if he couldn't bear to see anything more. Reyes read him his rights. Ethan continued to yell, but his voice gradually broke, full of desperation. The door closed behind him, leaving a heavy void in the house that had once been so familiar to me. I stood there, not crying, not trembling. I just felt a cold, empty expanse stretch out before me. 20 years of raising him, 20 years of trust, all for a poisoned box of tea and a curse. Linda looked up, her voice hoarse. "Margaret, I don't know what to say." I just shook my head. "There's no need to say anything. The truth is enough." Outside, the police car engine started, its blue and red lights flashing across the glass pane. I watched as my son's silhouette was swallowed by that light. A chapter was closing, but its aftertaste wasn't relief. It was the clear realization. Sometimes, the one you nurture with all your heart is the very first person who wants you to disappear. I turned my back, my voice echoing in the cold room. And now, I'm no longer a victim. I'm the last witness, and I will live to remember it all. A few months passed. My house was as quiet as before, but that quiet was no longer peaceful. It was a void, an echo of what was lost. Robert recovered slowly. Linda still came to visit, but we didn't talk much. Every time our eyes met, we both remembered that night, that cup of tea. Some memories don't need to be relived, because they are already etched too deeply. I tidied up the attic, opening old boxes filled with letters and family photos. In one picture, 10-year-old Ethan was smiling radiantly beside Daniel. I looked at it for a long time, until the child's eyes blurred. I didn't tear it up, didn't burn it. I just put it back in the box and locked it shut. The past had to stay there. Outside, the January sky was a solid gray, the wind whistling through the dry trees. I sat by the window, sipping a different herbal tea this time, brewed by my own hands, from leaves I chose myself. No one sent it, no one offered well wishes, and I no longer needed them. Ethan was in a prison hundreds of miles away. The news was scarce, but enough for me to know. The vortex he dug for himself had finally swallowed him whole. I took a slow breath, placing the cup on the wooden table. A person's life can be summed up in a simple truth. It's not death, but betrayal itself that kills you a little each day. And I was still alive, to remember, to bear witness, to carry that truth with me for the rest of my life.